This is the CreaseCast.
I think we've been pretty clear on our show that we are not pro playoffs by any stretch. We are pro reality, and the reality is you can sell and be sellers for the next 3 weeks and still eke into the playoffs because this division is a shit show. Right now, I think the Habs are crushing Edmonton 4-0 with 5 minutes left in the third.
This division makes no sense. It makes absolutely zero sense in any way, shape, or form.
And what makes even littler sense is that we are recapping a weekend wherein the Canucks did not play hockey. Welcome to the CreaseCast, everyone. I am your host, Cody Sievertson. With me, as always, is Lachlan Irvine. Today, we are not talking about Vancouver Canucks gameplay for a change, which is probably nice because I'm sure you're tired of hearing us complain about dismal back-checking efforts and Tyler Myers getting caught out on the ice and Niels Hoglander and Thatcher Demko doing everything they can. But It's not going to be one of those episodes. It's going to be a bit about the random stuff going on in the NHL, bits and pieces of Canucks news that actually all seem to trickle out within the last 24 hours, which is, I don't know, it was kind of funny. We started talking like an hour and a half ago, and maybe 25 to a half an hour before we started talking was when, or not, sorry, that's wrong. Like an hour to 2 hours before we started talking, they dropped the Adam Gaudette false positive or possible positive COVID test, which erupted a firestorm on Canucks Twitter on the what, the how, the where, the why, the when, and the what are they going to do when it comes to their COVID situation and their schedule, because they are supposed to play Wednesday night, which will be later today if you're listening to this episode tomorrow. But as far as we know, they're going to be sitting on their current test results. And if any of them come back positive or false positive, we might be looking at another week, maybe more, of delayed hockey because, I mean, barring maybe some bias from certain league executives, but I can't imagine the league would approve 2 players testing positive or 1 player testing positive from the Canucks and telling them and the Calgary Flames to go ahead with their game, especially when both teams aren't playing a series against each other. They are both then venturing off to go face other teams. So depending on how the league looks at it, they might see this as the breeding ground for a COVID outbreak spread if they let the Canucks play with one of their players with having recently tested positive with COVID. But if it's false positive, I don't know, maybe they take the chances. The league's kind of weird. The Habs had 2 players test positive outright, and they completely rejigged the entire schedule for 5 of the 7 teams.
The Canucks at one point were the only team, I think, in the entire NHL up until, currently technically still are. I believe the only team that has not had a schedule change. And I mean, you ask about the whole, will they shut down? I mean, I definitely think they're going to be on high alert, especially because, I mean, the way the math adds up, it is technically possible that it could be related to the Canadians, because keep in mind the Canucks did play the Habs over the 2 weekends ago. COVID can stay dormant in your system. One of the things we already know is that it can stay dormant in your system for up to 2 weeks before showing any sort of symptoms. That would line up right around here. It's a Tuesday, it's a little bit over, but Gaudette testing positive at this point, and the biggest worry here, of course, is that if that was related, as we saw with the Habs, one of the players who tested positive, we don't know which one, it was a variant of COVID. It was not the original. Yeah. It's not the main strain. It was a variant, which was very, very scary because, again, we're already dealing with the first variant with the original version of COVID. Now you start throwing variants in that vaccines aren't able to prevent or protect against, and it just becomes a huge mess. So the NHL was very quick to shut it all down as soon as they realized what was going on, which was, at the time, good on them for doing that.
Yeah.
And they've done a very good job. I mean, the Habs are playing right now for the first time since that.
Yeah, since the shutdown.
And I mean, the Canucks don't play till tomorrow night or today when you're listening to this. And if it's related, we're going to probably see them shut things down and immediately do this all over again in Vancouver. Hopefully it's a false positive. But even then, I wonder if maybe, because I think there's enough time in between this game and the next. I think the next game would be on Saturday between the Canucks and the Flames. I think it's 2. I think they've got 2 in a row here before the Canucks head out on the road, unless I am very much mistaken. There is enough time that say they could just postpone this game regardless. Wait to see what happens.
Just reschedule the Wednesday game and then just hope.
Just and push it to
another round of testing.
Yeah, I guess you could Friday, do that too. To Thursday or to Friday or something, just to give them the time to make sure everything's good.
Yeah, it just depends on when Calgary's next game is after Wednesday.
Yeah, but if that is if it's not a false positive, regardless of whether it's a variant or the regular original coronavirus. Oh, it's not good because Gaudette was pulled off the ice at practice today. And that means he was, in theory, exposed to everyone else in the rink was exposed to him. Which
coaching staff, rink staff, fellow players. He spent the weekend on a doggy date with Brock Besser and his puppies.
Which is,
there's a lot to kind of get into with this. And this is something that we've thrown our hands in the air over multiple times this year on our show, in that teams are both playing games and apparently practicing without confirmed negative test results, which for a league that with this much riding on it, it is unbelievable that we are 20 something games away from the supposed conclusion of this season. And they're apparently still doing shit that is just recklessly endangering the safety of all of these players.
Now, they are doing daily testing, though. They're doing daily testing. I don't know if it's super... I don't know if we'd say reckless, because they did test
It's still
yesterday.
Reckless, because what's the point of doing daily tests if you're just going to start practicing without the results? What's the point? You might as well practice and play without doing testing at all, because you clearly don't care about the results. That's what this says to me.
I guess the hard part of that is, I mean, I don't know, I don't know where the tests are being looked at, essentially, the result, the data and results are actually being looked at. I don't know if that's I've never had to take one of the tests. Somebody can tell me if you've taken the test before. You could probably tell me.
I think we talked about this maybe even one of our first or second episodes or something like that. It was about the fact that when the team does their tests, the results don't go to the players, but they go to the team's medical staff, who act in accordance with the local health authorities. It isn't like when you personally take a COVID test and you get your result and then you act individually. The team gets the results, and it's their discretion to notify the player of said result and then act accordingly and react to it. But as I said, it doesn't really make a difference if you do all these tests, but you still practice without knowing the results, because Gaudette showed up to the rink. He still practiced. He changed with the guys. He, spent, an hour and a half on the ice with them practicing. And then midway through, they pull him out and say, oh, you have a false positive, or you're positive, or you've either registered a false positive. You need to go take another test, and then everyone else here is going to have to do one as well. They still they still continue the practice with everyone else.
Right.
Which, we can get into that, but So now all of the Canucks need to self-isolate away from their spouses, their families, take a second like their usual daily test, but probably a bit earlier. And they need to, as a team, wait for the results to see if it was a false positive, if it was an actual positive, and see who else has been infected if it is in fact a positive test.
Right.
But at the same, like the whole thing is when that AHL game got started and then canceled after one period, it was a case of why didn't you just wait a half an hour for the results to come in?
I fully agree on that. I just wasn't sure. I'm fortunate enough that I have not had to take a COVID test. Like, I haven't even had to take the personal one. So I don't even know, like, how quick, when they say rapid testing, like, how quick are we talking?
They're very quick nowadays, like, without outing who, due to, patient confidentiality or whatever. Back in December, I think, or maybe last summer, when you took a test, it would take 48 hours plus to get a result. In December, you could get test results within 24 hours. And even till now, you can still get test results within 24 hours. So it takes a while.
So it takes a while.
But if you're doing it, like, say every morning you go to Rogers Arena, you get tested at 8 a.m. and they collect them all and send them off, you would have your results in theory before your practice the next day at 9:30 or 10 a.m., right? But at the same time, if you're still waiting on one player's test result, why are you practicing? They're all in a group chat. You just got to say, hey guys, practice is delayed half an hour. We're waiting on one test. But they couldn't do it. They're impatient, or they're stuck in their schedule, and they're just like, okay, we need to just get practice out of the way. We'll deal with the results, or the results don't matter right now for us. Either way,
or at the very least, have that player wait, and that
player
to wait.
Stay home until we know your result. You like, we know the league is all about being on time, showing up for practices on time, showing up 10 minutes early is on time, showing up on time is late. But I'm sure they would make an exception. The coach would have to make an exception and be like, hey, your test result isn't in yet. It's okay for you to be late because we're going to tell you if you're infected or not. It's wildly irresponsible in my books that they're still, across multiple leagues, the NHL, the AHL, they're still doing this where they just say, no, get the guys on the ice. We're sure we'll be fine even if someone does test positive, but we just need to get the practice time in.
Yeah.
It's so reckless. Like, reading that just bothers the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Especially knowing that Adam Gaudette and Besser both had their Instagram stories saying they were hanging out on the weekend. They were fully within their right to do so. Like, they were distanced. You don't need to have masks on when you're hanging out with people, so long as you're adequately distanced or whatever. If they're taking separate cars or whatever, like, you're well within your right to do that.
People were asking about that on Twitter today, and I think it was Vanessa Zhang who brought up a really good point where it was nobody puts 3 people and 3 dogs in the same, or 4 dogs actually. 4 dogs. 4. I forgot that both Besser has 2 dogs and the Gaudettes have 2 dogs, so they're not going in the same car. So it's very likely that they drove separately to go to the same place,
and regardless,
correct.
But also at the same time, technically they would be considered part of each other's work bubble, right? Because you're allowed to hang out with people inside of your bubble, right? So if your dad or whatever is part of your bubble because you see him every week and you don't see anyone else, then technically that's part of your bubble. If you spend time with some guy that you work next to or beside every single day, he's a part of your bubble, and that's okay. So technically they weren't breaking any rules.
No.
But the fact is, if not the player, like, I'm not going to blame Adam Gaudette for this at all, but
no,
this is definitely on the medical staff, which, I mean, we can get into with we'll have to do an episode maybe in the future about, like, all the failings of this Canucks team's medical, like, staff, because there are a lot of dicey things that have happened in the last 10 years, maybe, that indicate that they aren't doing a good job at taking care of their players. And I'm sure they see it too. I'm sure they saw that the people on their team are hanging out inside their own bubbles together because they can't do anything else. So you owe it to them to prevent them from coming to a hockey rink to practice if you don't have their test results in. It's a gross dereliction of duty to the players, and I wag my finger at them. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see me giving them your
giving
bad
them the finger.
I am giving them a fingering like no tomorrow.
Oh God. I will say this, like, again, we don't have any proof as to like say where we don't have any like obvious like technical proof on like where like the failing lies here. Obviously we're not as in tune with like some other reporters and everything. But I will say this, a few years ago, I wrote back when I was doing the old Sunday Crease column every single Sunday back in like, I think this was like 2017, 2018. This was the Boeser's rookie year, which eventually evolved into this podcast. I remember that season he was having the wrist issue. And we're going to be talking about wrists later in the show, wrist injuries later, because that's because we have to talk about Pettersson today as well.
Yes.
Boeser was having the wrist injury that just wouldn't go away. He kept coming back for a game or two, having it not feel well, and then leaving in a couple games, and then or like getting it checked on the bench, being out for another couple games, coming back and playing again. And I remember looking at that and thinking that's really fishy that he keeps getting that. Why would they keep letting him play if it's clearly not healing? Then he had there was that like freak incident with Cal Clutterbuck where he hurt his back and that put him out of commission. So we never really got a conclusion. But at the time, I actually did a little bit of research back when I think it's the site Man Games Lost or something. It's like the injury website, the Injury Viz website.
Yeah.
I remember looking at the time just to see what the Canucks had been how the Canucks like Man Games Lost had been doing when you factored out like some of the players like Ryan Kessler and Patrick Eaves at the time for the Ducks who were like chronically injured, weren't going to play again, sort of thing. The Canucks were at the top of the list, and they had been for Boeser's first year, and I think 2 years prior to that, which would have been.
They were always at the top of the list, and that's why everyone made fun of the regime for blaming injuries, and they couldn't see it coming. Because historically, they were always fucked by injuries.
Here's the thing: the first year of the Lyndon Benning era, they actually were healthy most of the year. They were actually much more like closer to the back of the pack.
Yeah.
And that summer, the Canucks let go of their entire medical staff. The medical staff that was there the first season and rehired a bunch of new ones. After that, every year, the very next season that with this new medical staff, suddenly the Canucks were one of the most injured teams in the league. And so many and I remember a bunch of times in that first little era of Lyndon and Benning, that lots of players were coming back very quickly from injuries and then leaving. Yeah. And I believe that's still the same medical staff.
Hasn't changed.
I don't think it's changed in that time.
It's been the same group since.
I don't have any proof that there's anything like, again, I don't have proof here. I'm not claiming I have some insider info.
No, but I do remember
I'm just saying,
the time, or like maybe like a couple years ago, I feel like someone did have a piece out there questioning the medical staff that had come in because of like just how bad the injuries had gotten on the team.
That might have been mine. You might have seen mine.
I might have saw yours. Yeah. But
that'd be funny.
And it was very interesting, like timing, obviously. And man, it's a little dicey when you get into the situation where it's like, this isn't a case of, someone, it's not like Pettersson and a questionable fractured wrist that keeps on getting worse and worse and delayed. This is a pandemic disease that is transferable among all ages and through tight spaces and cold environments, which is hockey practice to a T. And if the Canucks medical staff deemed that waiting to reveal the results or waiting to get results was better than, allegedly playing without actually having gotten the results. Like, I mean, I hope it's more than allegedly, because the other option is they knew he was tested positive and they kept him in practice until the NHL said you have to pull him out, which makes them look even worse.
I mean, I feel like there's like there's I think there's got to be at least one more gray area in there where it's like, I don't know if okay. I'm really not trying to clear. It's not that I'm trying to clear anybody of like guilt or anything. I just feel bad for everybody in this situation, and it's scary as is. And I'm just trying to I don't want to
You're trying to remain as optimistic as possible that people aren't this fucking dumb. That's the thing. You're trying to be hopeful that these guys would have the players' best interest and people's health and safety in the best interest.
And I don't want to kick people when they're down, right? Which is what's kind of happening
Elliot
here.
Friedman.
Hey, okay. Well, you know what? He's a good podcaster, so whatever. Thank you. No. What I was gonna say is basically, if you have all of the let's say you have 18. I get if you have 18 or so tests and they all came back negative, and there's one missing. I guess, you should be worried, but at the same time, it's kind of I do understand I understand the mindset of all of these came back fine. I think you're the odds are in our favor, but at the same time, if it's one test that's taking longer than everybody else's, then it's a bit of an issue. And I get when because what is this? This is day, I don't even know what day we're on in the season at this point. If you were counting, not by games, but by just days on the 90. Calendar, over 100, right? When you've done it over 100 times and every single time it's coming back negative.
I think it's only that whole way down.
Only day 90? Well, okay.
They started January 5th or January 15th.
Yeah.
So it's
still
less
a lot.
than 90.
There's still a lot, though. Still a lot of days in a row.
I guess I'm having a moment of why has this season felt like it's been going on for 10 years and it's only been 75 days. It's been 2.5 months. That's it.
Because they're just cramming it in they're cramming the whole season. So much, it's such a turnover. The turnover rate is crazy.
There's just so much content that you can't even keep up, and your brain can't even keep up either.
Anyway, I do imagine that there is the case of when you've literally done it as every single day, the way the Canucks are doing it, where it's, and every day nothing's happening. I get the I get the human aspect of being well, the last 74 times were fine. Why would 75th be the accident, right? I get that on a human level at the end, but at the same time, it's concerning. And if it turns out that it's, serious, yes, there's going to be a lot of tough questions, and there will absolutely deserve to be.
Yeah. Speaking of tough questions, apparently, and Canucks related as well, Jim Benning, apparently, after proclaiming that they were working on re-signing Tanner Pearson, 26 days later, they apparently finally reached out to him. I guess they finally got to Tanner Pearson's name on the to-do list 25 days later, and reached out to start talks about working on an extension, which brings us to a viewer or listener question from Marcus Meyer 27. What is the absolute maximum you would re-sign Tanner Pearson for?
Are we so I think there's two schools of thought here, because it's how much would you be willing to pay and how many years would you be willing to give, which can kind of go in different directions, right?
Sure. What would be because what's the worst contract you'd be willing to give him? What's the best contract, or what would you personally re-sign him to? I see his current deal as he's got 1 year left, his current deal is $3.75 million or whatever for this deal. I imagine he's going to want something kind of similar to what Tyler Toffoli got, or just a marginal raise on his current deal. And I assume at his age, at 28, he's probably going to want a form of trade protection, which, I mean, hey, Jim Benning has no problem giving trade protection out to his players. No issue there.
We're going to we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah. So I think for me, the highest I would be willing to go, and it's a deal he will never sign, is 2.225.
2.225, and then like how many years would you give for that sort
2
of
years.
deal?
2 years.
2 at 2.5. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
I would be pitching to him, Tanner. It's a flat cap. There are going to be very few teams looking for a middle six forward at the value that you're currently expecting. Like, you're going to have to take a discount. So if you don't want to move again and you want to keep on building with what you've got with Pearson, with Horvat and Hoglander and Miller. Yeah. I'm Tanner Pearson. Goodbye.
Yeah.
I would be, I mean, it's a low ball. Don't get me wrong, but you have to. If you're Jim Benning,
okay. Are you coming? Well, okay. If you're Jim Benning, if you are making that trade,
if I'm Jim Benning, I'm offering him 4 years and
I'm saying
$6 million.
Okay, if you're the GM, is that your low ball offer, or is that your I am not willing to budge off this ledge?
That's that's my not willing to budge number. My low ball would be like,
oh my God,
here's a league minimum deal at 1 year, right?
Okay, well then you're You're gonna lose in that way.
But like your contract starts somewhere, so you'd be like, okay, no one's gonna sign you to a 4-year, $4 million contract. I'd be like, hey Tanner, the only person that's gonna sign you to a 4-year deal is me, and I'm not gonna do it this time. So here's my next best offer. And it would be.
Sorry, just to correct you there. I think what he'd actually say is, "I want to give you that much, but I've already given 6 to Tyler Myers. So sorry, I've already given $6 million out this year for Louis Eriksson. So I can't give it to you.
I can't give it to you because it's tied up to Jay Beagle or Michael Furland or Tyler Myers or Braden Holtby. Like,
so
do yourself a favor, guys. Don't look at Cap Friendly's page in your spare time. It'll just
depress you.
Like the most depressing thing to ever read.
Okay.
What would you be? So my number as like I won't push past, but this is 2 years at 2.25 with no trade protection whatsoever. Okay. What's your I'm not willing to budge number?
So he's making 3.75 right now, 3.75 right now. And like you said, he might want something closer to like what Toffoli is getting, which is currently 4.25 million right now.
Yeah.
I don't think he'd hit 4 million, especially when you consider that, Toffoli's last contract was 4.6. So he did take a discount from his last contract with the Kings. I think Pearson would take a discount. I would be willing to bring back Tanner Pearson at around 3 million. I'm comfortable with that. He's 28, so he's still south of 30. I think if I'm using the compass directions correctly on in that analogy. I always forget which one is considered north, which one's higher or lower. I guess technically north is would be the higher one, right? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
so he's south of
his birthday is in August, so technically,
so he'd be 29 when the contract kicks in.
The contract would be his age 29 and age 30 years for mine.
Right. Okay. So I would say I would be willing to bring him in if we're talking he wants more. If term is more important than the money, I'd be willing to bring him. The money's more important than the term. I'd be willing to bring him in at about 3 million, maybe 3.25. If we're looking at maybe something like closer to what you had, like 2 or 3 years. I think 3 would be my max on that. But if he wants more term than money, I could look at going lower and closer to like the 2.5 million. Because here's the thing with Pearson is he's a good top 6 player, and this year has been a struggle for him. But even when he's doing okay, like even when he's not doing super well, he's still a really valuable asset at both ends of the ice, which is something the Canucks need desperately. And I could see him being the type of player who is technically depth, but can still actually jump up and contribute with the top scorers when necessary, and give you the third scoring line, and help you get a third scoring line going that you desperately need. I could see him being a bigger, like the piece to a bigger contender, where he would be lower on the totem pole at this point. He'd be not there. He would not be in the top 6 on a regular basis, but you would have a third line chipping in regularly and being an offensive contributor. On a
very good team, he'd be like a great bottom 6 piece, basically.
Yes, which is what I'm looking at, because I think you can justify giving him closer to like that 3 million if it's like on a 2 to 3 years, because he's still got youth, he's got scoring ability.
He's streaky, but like he has the proven ability to play up in the lineup, which is kind of what they need, is someone who can slide up. Because I mean, look at the current roster as it's constructed right now. They lose Elias Pettersson, they lose Adam Gaudette, and then their top 6 looks like Jimmy Vesey as your top line winger, and Travis Boyd is your like second line or third line center. Like they don't have the depth to accommodate these kinds of losses. Like Tanner Pearson, like if Pettersson's gone and they move up, like you still have Tanner Pearson, who's going to be like an okay piece in your top 6.
Yeah.
Whereas without Pearson, without Pettersson, suddenly it's like you got nothing, and the coach doesn't trust any of the pieces. Like he barely trusts Gaudette in like a line with JT Miller in sheltered minutes. So
yeah, and I think as you get stronger and some of your younger guys start coming up and and getting better cracks, how good does that team look all of a sudden when you have like when you have a decent guy playing on that second line as well as Miller, and you have Tanner Pearson on that left side? Suddenly that's a good looking left wing. It's and so I think if the Canucks have the ability to bring him back, again, this is mostly contingent also on the idea that they move out some money from other places first,
which is a big ask for this group.
Which is a huge ask. But I would also be willing to go like longer if he wants something closer to like 4 or 5 years. Like I'd be willing to go, okay, we're going to have to bring it closer to the 2 million range. If you want that long, and there's going to be less trade protection on that. But at the same time, that contract is going to be a little bit more movable if things go wrong, because like you said, like everybody, there's a lot of teams that would want a Tanner Pearson. He's not even when he's not doing well. Again, does not make a lot of mistakes on the ice. Like there are not a lot of times when he plays where you're like, oh, Pearson completely messed that up or something like that. He doesn't. He's not that kind of player, generally speaking. He's very accident proof, and any team will pay for that. Even if things go haywire on that contract, you can move that.
You'd probably have to retain a bit, because it is a big deal. Like 3.75 for a guy you're obtaining to be a utility piece in your bottom 6 who can maybe move up during playoffs. 3.75 is a lot, and a lot of the Canadian teams don't have space except for the Senators, and they're not contending anytime soon, right? So
even if you retain, you're only retaining about, like, because I think mine was, I said 3.25, I think is what I went with. That's still only about, that means if you were retaining the most you possibly could, that's 1.12 million. It's not great, but it's not like undoable, like it's not a killer.
It's better than, say, like Jake Virtanen's like backloaded deal or something like that, right? Where suddenly you have like you can't really retain it because the cap hit itself is fairly low, but because it's so backloaded, like no owner really wants to take on that kind of money in this economy.
No.
Yeah, so
that's why you got to look at, and this all goes back kind of to the team construction aspect of it. Is as your team gets better, the better your team gets, and the more the players can see the writing on the wall of what your capabilities are, the more likely they are to take team-friendly contracts. I mean, look at Tampa. That team is just filled with contracts well below value because...
To be fair, though, Tampa's tax rate is like a joke. So they did the math, and it was like, what's his name? JT Miller's deal was worth like $7 million if it was in Canadian, like if it was in like Vancouver's market. That's how like much of a benefit was to play in a market like with such low tax rate as Florida. So they look like hometown deals, but in reality, they get way more out of their money. And I mean,
but I think when you're a contending team, like if you're a good team, I think players could care less. In the sense of like, if they can see, hey, you're only a piece away from winning a championship or something, or being a true championship contender, I think players are willing to be like, I don't care about the taxes, I want my damn ring. Like they're flexible on that kind of stuff. And also, I do think I've seen articles on this before, that there are ways to get around the tax issues, like in terms of like getting creative with how your contracts are structured in certain ways that you do them. There are ways to get around the issues with playing in high tax places. And I believe the article I saw at the time was in regards to the Montreal and the Canadiens, which I believe has the highest tax rate in North America. So, and they were like talking about how there are ways you can do it. You can structure a deal so that it does not affect the tax rates on the players nearly as much, and it looks a lot more close to what you would get in a place like Florida or something, where the taxes are next to nothing. So
fair enough.
Again, it comes back to can you build a team well equipped to go far in the playoffs, that players would be willing to take a little less money to go after chase a championship? And do you have a management group that is creative enough to find good solutions to to cap issues and flexibility issues, which right now I'm going to have to say is no. So it's a matter of, can you fix that? And if you can do that, there's a lot more you can do, and the possibilities go wide open. So I wouldn't mind Tanner Pearson on the right contract.
Yeah, well, since the Canucks are neither creative nor forward-thinking or progressive, let's move on
day
to
by
our
day.
next. Yeah, since this current regime is neither of those things, anything we're talking about is moot because nothing positive is going to happen. It's going to be probably a bunch of meaningless deals as the owner cheaps out again. One of those players he can probably cheap out on, depending on how his surgery goes, is Justin Bailey. Unfortunately, he was tweeting or Instagramming pictures of himself from a hospital bed in New York. Tough break for him. It looked like he finally kind of earned the trust of Travis Green in his very brief look with the Canucks this season. He got some decent minutes and then took a complete cheap shot from Milan Lucic in the numbers. Of course, it went uncalled. Daniel Wagner, our former editor at Vancouver's Awesome, had a great little article about it, just kind of going in on the league's non-calls on boardings this year. And to Daniel's credit, he didn't just say this is all against the Canucks. He proved examples of even the Canucks doing the exact same shit. I completely forgot about Jalen Chatfield's boarding of Alex Kerfoot, and holy shit, was that an ugly, ugly hit. So
there were two though. There were two with the Canucks because there was that one where you remember watching that play, and again, like no matter how much of a Canucks fan you are, I don't think any Canucks fan was watching that play, saw that Chatfield hit, and wasn't like, oh, okay, he's done. His game's over. He's suspended for a while, and then nothing happened. He didn't even get a penalty on that play.
Yeah.
And then Kerfoot did the same thing to who was it? He did it to, I believe, I want to say it was like it wasn't JT Miller, I don't think. It was some player he hit from right in the numbers, and he thought he was getting a penalty instantly. He was like, oh, damn it. Like, he knew what he had done, and no call, no boarding, nothing. And
it's
just embarrassing. It's been like this all season, not just in the Canadian division, across the league. Just so many things going unnoticed, and then you hear quotes like from Ray Whitney talking about how players the player needs to know how to be hit, and it's like, okay, shut up. You played in the 90s where a bunch of the greatest players in the league had to retire early because of concussion problems. Maybe you don't know what you're talking about.
In regards to like the Ray Whitney thing, like the fact that the league is taking an approach of players, not just star players, but players in general need to be the ones responsible for putting themselves in positions to not get hurt, rather than players need to take onus of not hurting others, is like some backwards ass logic that I will never understand.
Victim blaming. It's like, straight up victim blaming. Like, when you get hurt, it's your fault for not being hit properly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, I had my back turned.
It's the she was asking for it with what she was wearing of hockey logic. Like
much less serious at the end of the day, but yeah.
Oh, like absolutely. I'm not saying they're the same, but just like that's like
I'm just
it's
clarifying.
Like the same kind of logic where they think, oh, players facing the boards doing a play that happens a million times out of a million, and somehow it's his fault if Milan Lucic takes 8 strides from the goal or from the crease and then puts his stick in the back of Justin Bailey, who's unexpecting it, and then separates his shoulder and requires season-ending surgery, and it doesn't even get a look from the league.
Yeah, if I got stabbed, it's because I got in the way of somebody's knife, not because they stabbed me.
Exactly.
Like that, it's beyond ridiculous, and they think this, and it's this whole, goes back to really this whole concept of when it comes to player safety, where they're always like, hey, I know what, it's a great idea. Let's hire all the goons who took all these penalties and did all these dirty things. And
the ones who knew what was the most egregious of crimes to commit on the ice. Like,
right. And definitely not think, which totally won't backfire the minute they're like, well, everything was, I was fine doing all these things, so they should be too. It's so unbelievably backwards. And I mean, we had this talk last episode basically with Tim Peel and everything, where there are just so many parts of the way that the league works when it comes to the discipline and when it comes to the way that penalties are doled out during games, where it's just so backwards and it needs just a complete overhaul. But as long as the same people are in charge, it never will. It never will change. Like, no matter how much we yell. I mean, maybe if you yell loud enough, like public pressure works.
Eventually it's going to reach a boiling point. Like the cross checks and the boardings that have gone uncalled are eventually going to reach a boiling point when someone gets severely injured this season. And then once players start actually actively calling out the NHLPA, or sorry, when the NHLPA like steps in and says, the league disciplinary group needs to actually start doing something, maybe something happens. But for now, it just feels like kind of screaming at a wall. And
I go back to when they really started going harder on the penalties. Like, you think back to, I think it was the Mark Savard hit, or the Matt Cook on Mark Savard or something, where guy where got the book for like 20 games or something. It was like, they were giving
Rafi Torres took the knee on knee or whatever it was,
because they tried
to go knee on knee, but he did something in like a preseason game that was like ridiculous.
He did multiple things where he got
he was a complete dirtbag. Like,
we liked him for the 1 year in Vancouver, but he
was a riot. You loved him when he was on your team, but like you saw the shit he did, and it was like just like, oh god. But anyway.
But like, you think about those where they were like just throwing the book, and it really almost feels like they did all of that stuff and then they were like, problem solved, guys, we did it. We did, like, the unfurl the banner, we did it. We fixed it. No one will ever make this hit again because we went so hard the first time, and then they just got lackadaisical from there. Not that it wasn't that they shouldn't have given out those penalties in those early ones, but it's that idea of they they tried to use them to set a precedent and then completely skated away from it, and to the point where they're not even looking at like half the plays that need to be more egregiously looked at, more obviously looked at.
Yeah, I think,
and you hope Bailey gets better. Like with his timetable of no return, it's tough to see his season end like that. I mean, it's not obviously he's not. I mean, the second he was going to New York, you knew to see the specialist. Like you knew the season was done.
Yeah, you knew it was pretty much bad news bears. So yeah, hopefully he recovers and maybe he gets another extended look next season with the Canucks. They've had some pretty bad luck with, players like in having really good years or appearing to break out and then getting these kind of possible career altering injuries. Like Josh Levo has his kneecap shattered and then he moves to Calgary. It hasn't looked the same. Antoine Roussel blows his ACL after having by all accounts, a breakout incredible year for the Canucks. And then now Justin Bailey joins that rank of guys who just get these unfortunate injuries that completely fuck up their career. Hopefully it won't affect his shooting rates. He's got a great shot at the AHL level. Hopefully it won't affect his skating at all. I can't imagine it would, but the CreaseCast hopes he comes back because I think we were both on the same page that we were liking the progress that he was making.
Yeah.
Speaking of progress or the lack thereof, onto the NHL news. The Calgary Flames have broken your boy.
I'm so mad.
Jacob Markstrom has regressed, or at least appears to have regressed to his pre-Ian Clark days of goaltending. I personally think he's probably due for a regression to what he was last year, where his save percentage is unreal. He's obviously dealing with a Calgary Flames team that is, as we've spoken about at length on this program, about how the Calgary Flames appear to be checked out and aren't really trying and kind of letting David Riddick and Jacob Markstrom just get fed to the wolves. I don't want to go into it for too long, but I think he's going to probably bounce back, and it might not be without Ian Clark, but at the end of this year, when Ian Clark is up for a contract renewal, I'm sure the Calgary Flames are going to come calling, and I'm sure he'll have a bounce back some way, somehow. But post-injury, whatever injury it was that, he took on from the Flames that kind of kept him out for a bit and has him with an 844 save percentage or something like that in his last 11 games since coming back from injury. Hasn't been good. So Lachlan, your thoughts on your former boy?
I'm going to tell you right now, we need to stop letting the Calgary Flames get a hold of decent goalies because they wreck them every single time. How many times has this franchise picked up a goalie who was by all accounts decent before he got there or had a really good year, like a really couple good years before they got to Calgary, and then immediately just get roasted over the spit? Like Brian Elliott, I think, had a really good year in St. Louis the season before, gets to Calgary, immediately just gets washed. Mike Smith had been doing okay by all accounts before he got to Calgary, and then he got burnt to a crisp. David Riddick was fine at points, and now he's not great either.
I remember when the Flames picked up Mike Smith, and I said, oh, the Flames are actually going to be trying to be a team this year, and I thought that was a great pickup. And then
every year they do
Flames gonna flame. It's just
this is the first time. This is the first time they've given serious term and money to a goalie to get it done. And I remember thinking at the time, if they get the right coaching, he will do great. He will be as good. And I remember
and then they got the Sutter.
Well, yes, and Jeff Ward as well. Mostly I'm talking goalie coaching, but I mean, yes, that's not help. Because you know what, the same mentality exists that existed with the last goaltenders, which is, hey, this is a good goalie. We're gonna burn them to the ground by playing them way too much when they have bad games. Leaving them in, or or just destroying their confidence in the ways that whenever they have poor games, or just and they get hurt or something. And
what was that game the other day where he let in 7 goals and then Sutter after the fact was like, I had no intention of pulling him out, and you're like, but why?
And then even in the last game, he got pulled in the last game. Markstrom got pulled in the last game. It was 4-1. I think Daryl Sutter said something where he knew by like the second period or like midway through the second period that he was gonna pull him. And didn't. And I'm thinking, like, what? Or he did. Like, he knew he was gonna, and like he waited until the third to put David Riddick in. And I'm like, why would you do that?
He didn't want to embarrass him in front of the crowd.
In front of the goddamn crowd. Like, hey,
the cardboard cutouts,
literally, hey, commercial break. That's when you pull him out. Why would you leave him in for another period and then send in Riddick? Like, that's terrible planning. And I mean, this whole team is just like, the whole Flames team is a mess. I mean, there was a whole, did you see the quote Daryl Sutter had about Johnny Gaudreau's 500th NHL game? It was like, he should have more energy.
I hope he shows more effort than he did in his 499th game. And it's just like,
as you can tell, things are going fantastic in Calgary.
We don't even have enough time to go over like the Sutter thing, because it's kind of like when we talked in our second episode or first episode about how Patrick Laine is not going to be a fit with Tortorella and it's a disaster waiting to happen. I don't know how the Flames thought like what this core needed was Daryl Sutter, a guy who in his last year with the LA Kings was locked out and barricaded from the locker room because nobody wanted to deal with him anymore. Like,
but
how?
But
did you think this would work?
Yeah, it's not even only that, because here's like this is a quote. This is a Johnny Gaudreau quote, because somebody asked him about it in the Calgary Sun.
It's a good quote.
Yeah, he's like, I heard it, didn't think much of it, Gaudreau said when being asked post-game about the sharp critique from his coach. I've been playing hockey for 24, 25 years now, and I know when I haven't played well, and I know when I have played well, which is just crazy thing to say about your coach, which I mean, here's like, we've had all the conversation before where, hey, are the Flames maybe coach killers, specifically that first generation of him and Monahan? That kind of told me everything I need to know, where it's, hey, these guys do not listen to their coaches, so no one you bring in is going to fix that.
These guys don't respect authority, because the coach questioned their work ethic instead of being like, I'll prove him wrong. It was, I know when I have a bad game. It's like,
which is like, it just tells you everything you need to know about those players, and as well as how this is not going to work with that coaching staff at all, who they've already given a 3-year contract to. So, oops. Needless to say, the way the Flames are handling everything, it just seems like they're doing everything so poorly. I said this to you, and I think I said this publicly on Twitter, that I am like 99% sure the Canucks are going to finish ahead of them in the standings by a healthy margin.
For sure.
They're clearly they're not the Canucks aren't a good team, but they're clearly right now a more cohesive unit than what Calgary has.
I think the Canucks are probably going to end up 5th in the division and miss the playoffs by just like a small margin. That's my guess at this point. And you know what?
Which this year is fine, because you know what? Like,
it's not fine that you're wasting the final year of Elias and Quinn's ELCs. But honestly, if the way they started, like, there was just no coming back in the first place, and it's become like a let's see what you got in all your prospects type of season now.
And even if you're like bad, this isn't like a year where you would want to tank or something, because obviously when it comes to like the draft, like there is
we talked about this in our last episode, right?
But right, and this is so it doesn't really matter where you finish at this point. Like this is very much find every way you can to get your players confidence going into next year. You especially give your younger guys a look. And I have no doubt Calgary is cooked. This is 5 teams. There are only 5 teams left here.
Speaking of teams that are cooked and not responding well to coaches,
oh no.
I missed this game because I fell asleep, but I wanted to watch it very badly. I came home, checked the NHL standings, and was like, Buffalo is up 1-0 in the first period. And I was like, oh man, this is gonna be great. And then I passed out and I woke up and refreshed my game center thing. And it was like they were up 3-0. Scroll down a bit, 4 goals. I'm like, oh my God, Buffalo, what the hell is going on? It's so funny. And just, I think we talked about this in our last episode, but like, you cannot ruin the fact that this is the longest winless streak. Overtime losses do not count towards wins. They are losses. Call it a winless streak or whatever. Points should not matter. You have not won a game. These are not victories. Overtime losses are not victories. No matter if you get points or not, they're loser points. They're literally called loser points. Yeah. So
I saw a great meme. I saw a great meme in the Twitter replies to like that's the final score, like the final score from Buffalo sort of thing on the Sabres Twitter account. Somebody took the screen grab from a SpongeBob episode where it's like Plankton's like, tell him off, like, that's my win. Good. Now let him have it. You can have it. I thought I busted a gut over that. That was funny. And it had more likes than the actual Sabres tweet. I'm like, oh, hats off to you. That is some good meme. That's some good meme work. But at the same time, I feel so, it's so telling that as Canucks fans and as we are dealing with the ridiculous, awful season that we're having here, that you can't help but still look at Buffalo and be like, oh, buddy, we look at them like, oh, I can't imagine what you're going through.
You know, like we talk about Buffalo way too much on this podcast. It's like absolutely insane, but like it's hard not to because they're such a tire fire. But
I think the one stat
that is just so shocking to me is that they've played 34 games and have scored only 71 goals. That is,
oh my God. Oh,
like, buddy. When you consider they have Jeff Skinner, they don't have Jack Eichel right now, but they have Jeff Skinner, Taylor Hall, Dahlin, like Colin Miller. They have people Victor Olofsson, like they have people that can score at the NHL level. That is such a pathetic number. That is just barely over 2 goals a game.
And you lost to the Flyers, who are doing like it's not even how you lost. It's that you lost to the Flyers in that fashion.
The Flyers who can't buy a save for their like entire life. They cannot buy a save.
Like they've looked atrocious, like defensively. Like there was the one play in that game where the Sabres scored, I believe, where four of them were Flyers were right in front of the net. Like, what are you doing? There was a guy wide open. For them to lose in that fashion, I watched the final couple minutes of that game. Like I actually pressed the watch button right after they tied it. I'm like, oh nice. My God.
That's good timing.
Then watch them blow the lead and watch them blow the game in overtime. And I'm just like, what do you do? Like, there's nothing you can do. You're cooked. Like no one's going to, at this point, because no one's going to play for you. No one's going to sign with the Sabres. No one wants to go there. Eric Stahl was like, I'm not going to talk about it after he was traded. Like, you're cooked. What can you do?
Kevin Bieksa was on with Halford and Bruff on Sportsnet 650 and basically said,
shout out to those guys. They're back.
Yeah, they're back. That's great. He said, like, growing up, like he could never get tickets to a Toronto game. They were too expensive. So his dad would always take him and his like family to Buffalo games. And he said, like, and I quote, the team is a dumpster fire. Like it's just like, I don't know what's going on. At some point you have, like, this is his words, you have to wonder if the well has been poisoned and a guy like Jack Eichel is just going to be ruined for the rest of his career by this.
Oh yeah.
Like if I'm a Buffalo fan, I'm almost like, it would suck to see Dahlin and Eichel traded away, but I mean, you watch the defensive effort by like a guy like Dahlin, and you're just like, there's no coming back if this is his effort on this team at this point. Like you need something more. Like you can only lose so much where it's just like, oh, it's just bad luck. They're just having the roughest go. It's like, no, the team needs to buy in and play well to try and win. And
18
if they're
losses
giving up
in a row that's not luck, it's a pattern.
That's not luck. That's a pattern of like just failure from the coaches, from ownership, from the players, just not giving a flying fuck. You have Rasmus Ristolainen suffering from COVID and then coming back and being like, I'm so used to losing. Shit happens. It's like, oh my God. Like if you're any GM with a brain would throw him on waivers instantly on that shit. They'd be like, I do not want this guy, a veteran of my leadership or my locker room, telling all of my young kids, Casey Middlestat,
okay losing.
Jack Eichel, and Rasmus Dahlin, that it's fine. Hey guys, just a heads up. This happens all the time with me. Get used to it. Like that's
like he's
completely unacceptable.
He's cashing a paycheck and like just because, and that's all it is to him. Like, maybe that's not how it is, but like you know that's what it sounds like, and that's not good. That's not the messaging you want to be giving off about your franchise. And I do fully believe in that system of like, you can't, depending on what a system is, like players can absolutely, like trajectories can be absolutely changed based on just who they go to and who they play for. Like, this is obviously a very different sort of situation than like a Jack Eichel, but like with Jake Virtanen as an example, I always like we've always kind of joked about how everyone is worried that he'll turn into Cam Neely the minute he gets traded out. And that's like a constant fear for a couple people, like for quite a few people.
for two people, one very specific person.
Yes, but even but the thing that I always my answer with that is always, even if he did, that should just confirm to you that this wasn't the good fit for him. Not that wasn't a possibility.
He's just checked out for this team or whatever, and it's never going to happen anyway.
Maybe this setup is not, like, whether that's because he plays in his hometown, whether that's the coaching the kinds of coaches he's getting, or the people managing it. Like, there are a bunch of different factors that could play into the idea of, maybe this player doesn't work in this specific environment, but he could work in this one. And vice versa, a player who is very good could easily be totally ruined by being thrown into the wrong situation. And Buffalo is very, very much like, well, they're not running the risk. They've already done it. They've already taken players who are,
the risk by all has accounts, been Rusk.
Okay, and just poisoning it. I mean, you have to go nuclear option, but I don't even know how you would go about that. Like, how do you blow it up in that kind of way, you know?
No idea, man. It's a tire fire.
And with, you mentioned Ristolainen on waivers. There was speaking of that game and everything, there was one guy who played in that game and is now on waivers on defense, and that's Shayne Gostisbehere. He is now available.
I had a interaction on Twitter about this with someone who was like, you have to start wondering if it's on the player. And I don't watch enough Flyers, or I've never watched enough Flyers games to ever analyze Gostisbehere's game. Mm-hmm. But I know for a fact that ever since Alain Vigneault became the coach of the team, he's been on the outs with that group since. He's always in and out of the lineup ever since AV took over. I don't know why. It's just the way it goes. I also was laughing super hard at people being like, should the Canucks claim him? I'm like, if you guys not looked at I said it earlier, don't look at the cap friendly unless you feel like being depressed. But sometimes you have to, especially when it comes to waiver claims of people making $4 million.
Yes. And but let's say for a second the Canucks didn't have cap issues, and it was just let's say they were middle of the pack.
Yeah, but that's never going to happen.
Okay. Let's say for all intents and purposes that they were more closer to middle of the pack, and they had kind of the flexibility to take these kinds of deals. Then would you take Gostisbehere in that situation?
Well, yeah, if cap isn't an issue, but that's the thing, cap is an issue, and that's you can't separate the two.
Right. And I'm not,
because obviously if cap wasn't an issue, you'd be going after players that are better than Shayne Gostisbehere too, right? Okay. You know what I mean?
Well, what I'm saying is the idea that a Gostisbehere came up, yes, we should be giving the Canucks flack for not having the flexibility to do these kinds of things because, frankly, you should. Like, maybe not every team should be in this situation, but considering what you went through in the offseason, considering what you've been dealing with over the last few years, there are certain contracts on this team that, had you not signed them, you would have the flexibility to wait for something like this to fall right into your lap and do something and make something happen that you might not have been able to at a certain before. And it sucks because Gostisbehere would be a huge improvement on what they have here. And I mean, I will say there's a possibility if they're again, coming back to the forward thinking thing again, you can maybe claim him, put a claim in for him, and then work on the money work on getting the money out while that's happening. It puts you on a clock, but you might be able to do it.
What team are you watching, dude? That's never gonna happen. Two things being managed at once. Are you
two
insane?
things? Multitasking. Yeah. Never heard of her. Never heard of her.
Like, she sounds great, but that's never gonna happen.
It's too bad because he would be a really good pickup. Like, okay, he's not maybe as good as like
he's fine, but I honestly for $4.25 million, like what you'd have to do is you'd have to ship someone out full freight. So you'd have to be paying someone to take on like Virtanen plus another contract or Pearson and another contract because like they don't really have a $4.25 million contract that's easily able to move out. Like you have Berchi and Eriksson, but nothing on the main active roster that you can clear out. So you'd have to give up, you have to pay to get rid of 2 deals to take on a deal that's the equivalent amount of dollars.
But there is the fact that you might be better after that than you were before. Like if you make those crazy moves, you might be better.
You're going to be spending and weakening your forward or defense position because you had to pay for someone to take 2 bad contracts out just for a single player.
A
28-year-old defenseman who's going to expire after next year.
For sure. But here's the thing. I mean, they're going to have to do it at some point anyway. Like this is going to happen. You're going to have to pay people to take some bad contracts off your books.
Well,
whether or not you take Gostisbehere, that's going to happen.
I would push back on that and say, if last offseason was any kind of indicator, the team isn't willing to spend anything to get rid of bad contracts. Yeah, they're not. They had all the time, and well, we say they had all the time. They said they didn't have all the time in the world, but they had all the time on the planet to move out money, and they didn't because they didn't want to spend to get rid of the awful contracts they signed. So at this point, I think when Jim Benning says in 2 years they're going to be competing with the elites of the division, I think that's coming from a place of that's when all the contracts are off the books where I don't have to spend anything to get rid of them. It isn't like that's when I'll have moved out all the contracts and acquired better players. That's when they'll just have vanished on their own accord. That's my thinking anyway, but
that would also imply that he gets his extension because he's only got 1 year left on his contract. So,
well, maybe it's a mandate from ownership. Maybe Francesco's like, hey, I don't want you giving up a bunch of shit to get rid of these contracts. You made your bed. We're going to have to grit this out. And you're going to have to find ways to get better elsewhere, which could happen. We have no idea.
I mean, if that's the case, I don't even think he'll be around by the offseason to decide on what to do with those contracts. Right. So who knows? It could change. The philosophy could change if somebody new comes in. You never know.
Yeah, but that 2-year figure that he pitched obviously was something he had worked out with ownership, because I'm sure if that came out of nowhere, I'm sure he would have been gone that day. But anyway, speaking of gone, not that day, but yesterday or the day before, Aaron Ekblad.
You're stretching for the segues.
Right. I'm pushing because I'm tired and I have to pee.
That's fair.
Aaron Ekblad, unfortunately, took a really bad fall, trying to dodge basically a trip attempt along the end boards. It wasn't like malicious by any stretch, but he was just trying to jump out of the way of a sliding skater so that he wouldn't collide with them. And unfortunately, He put his entire body weight on his left leg and it completely buckled and fractured.
Ugh,
and what
gruesome.
was once probably the leading candidate for the Norris, which we will get into immediately after this segue, is now out for the remainder of the season for a team in Florida that was surprisingly the top of the new Central Division. Tough break for him. Tough break for Florida. I don't know how they're going to replace Ekblad. Like, that's a massive, massive loss.
I mean, the short answer is you can't. I mean, there's not. They're not gonna. There's nothing.
The short answer is Shayne Gostisbehere.
Shayne Gostisbehere. I was gonna ask who you think would pick him up. Florida might be there because they have cap room.
It might be a freebie.
And if he's out all year anyway, like, you might as well try. You might as well go for it. It's such a bummer. He's been doing so well. Like, that whole Florida team has been defying the odds all Like,
when Dredger,
I don't know.
Dribbler. When Chris Glibler is carrying the goaltending with like stellar backup performances, and Bobrovsky is like kind of playing up to his previous form, they're suddenly a contender, and Joel Quenneville is probably launching himself into a Jack Adams consideration with the way his team is performing this year. They have the third best goal differential in their division. They're like on a 3-game winning streak, sub 100 goals against. Like, they're doing really solid, and man, you have to feel bad for them. I think they're playing well enough that even without Aaron Ekblad in the lineup, they'll still be okay, but it won't be nearly as easy. But they have they have Huberdeau, they have Barkov, that are like guys that are just playing out of their minds right now. So I think they can do it. It's just like, obviously you hate to see that happen. And what you really hate to see happen from someone like Ekblad going down is players like Drew Doughty become Norris contenders again. You shared this with me. I don't know why I don't know why you felt like ruining my Tuesday night.
Yes, I decided to ruin your Tuesday.
Yes.
Well, it ruined mine too. Like, good Lord, how are we? Okay,
if anyone reads this, they were immediately pissed off because it's
this is from NHL, NHL.com. Like, they had the NHL writers
mid-season awards or whatever,
mid-season
or like
awards
they're polling to see where people are at or whatever.
Yeah, and this is so embarrassing. Drew, like, it's a small sample size, but Drew Doughty, of all the defensemen in the NHL in 2021, Drew Doughty was given the most votes for the Norris. The runners up including, of course, Shea Theodore on the Knights, who is awesome.
Oh my God.
Samuel Girard, also very good, as well as Alex Pietrangelo and Cale Makar. And one of the writers was asked about why he picked Drew Doughty, his quote was, plays and plays and plays, and we might add, and leads the NHL in ice time per game. One validates the other. Fun fact. No, it doesn't.
Stupid.
No, it absolutely doesn't.
Big surprise. This is like when we were talking about the other awards, when it was plus minus dictated who was winning the Hart Trophy. And it's like, how can you honestly say that time on ice is the validating factor for a player being deserving of the fucking Norris? Like, by this token, give it to Tyler Myers for all of the 5-minute shifts he gets stuck on the ice for. Like, if that's the qualifier, is just being on the ice a lot, then any idiot who gets stuck on the ice is qualified. Like, sure, the Kings are playing very well. They are surprising a lot of people in that very shitty Pacific Division. But Drew Doughty and the aging core of the Kings are really doing well at carrying a very young and inexperienced team to playing above where most people had expected them to be. That's fine. Is it Norris worthy? No. Playing a lot of minutes is not Norris worthy. Okay? It's just not. what Aaron Ekblad was doing in Florida was Norris worthy. What Victor Hedman does every year is Norris worthy. What Matt
Victor
Hedman pulls off, you know what I mean? Like
Victor Hedman, who just left a game today with injury, so there's that going as well.
It's the door's widening open for Drew
Drew. Oh, it's finally Drew's moment.
And Shea Weber and PK Subban again. The same three guys every year.
It's so funny that we went from like it's almost like the everyone yelling at the voters like, hey, stop basing the Norris vote on who scores the most points. They're like, you got it. Here's we're gonna vote based on their ice time. No, not that way. Like I don't get how this is where we've gotten to with how to pick who's the best defenseman in the NHL. And even if we decided that basing ice time was the correct way to go, you're going to look at like Drew Doughty instead of, Thomas Chabot, who's literally playing 30 goddamn minutes a night for a terrible team and doing okay.
And doing like fantastic. Like, if the qualifier is time on ice, you should give it to someone who's like carrying his team regardless of where they are in the standings, where, like you said, Thomas Chabot, 35 plus minutes every single game, points every single game. And he's doing it while like stuck on a pairing with like Eric Goodbranson. Like, how could you not vote for that? Like,
if only there was an award for a player who is individually carrying their team for most of the season. I really wish such an award existed. That would be it'd be wonderful. If only they had sort of most valuable player.
Sorts, you know, like
I don't know what it would be called. Something like that. I don't know. I just came up with this on my own. It's bonkers that this is in 2021 where there are so many young, good defensemen coming up through the ranks that we're still hung up on giving the awards to Drew Doughty and like talking about how Carey Price is a Vezina Trophy is a candidate. You
just kind of tie it into like the fact that the NHL has done such an awful job at promoting young stars. Like Sam Girard on the Avalanche should probably be a Norris contender. Like everyone's all bitter about like the Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, Calder vote, but Cale Makar is really fucking good. And yes, he's on a really good team, but he's really fucking good.
He's better than he's doing better now than Drew Doughty is. Like, I mean, that's
Adam Fox is like one of the best defenders in the entire NHL. No one talks about him. He should have probably been. Like,
and he's in New York. He plays in New York City, huge market, the largest market in North America.
Yeah, he should be like the guy that the NHL would want to advertise all the time. This guy who went to Boston University, signed with the Rangers, and was a Calder nominee, didn't win, and then is a Norris candidate on a middling, underachieving New York Rangers team being led by Artemi Panarin. Like, he's leading the team himself. Like, anyways, I don't want to get into too much.
I don't want to get into if this is how people are voting for the awards, then the awards have lost most of their meaning.
Most awards, like award shows, you can track it to like the Grammys or like the Academy Awards.
Oscars.
Like, people patting themselves on the back is always like kind of cringe and never really reflective of like what was the actual best. But because this is theoretically picked by the people watching players the most, you would expect it to be more reflective of actual on ice skill. And as we saw with the MVP votes, where apparently the two most valuable players to their team were on the exact same team together, you know, the voting just doesn't work sometimes, and they miss. And the fact that Drew Doughty in the year 2021, the year of our Lord, is getting first place Norris votes is just absolutely insanity to me.
And I forget who brought this up on Twitter, but I saw somebody talking about like if people want to make a big deal about the whole analytics versus eye test thing, fine. But what in your eye test is making you see Drew Doughty as a Norris candidate? Like, what on earth are you seeing out of him when he's playing? Like, it doesn't take advanced stats to tell you he is not the best defenseman in the NHL anymore. Or rather, if he ever really was. Like, I mean, he was always up there and decent, but definitely this year he's not even close to number one.
It's the eye test of I know
his name.
Yeah, my eye test saw Connor McDavid's plus minus, therefore he is the league's MVP. My eye test saw Drew Doughty's time on ice, therefore he is a Norris winner. Like,
I saw Drew Doughty on a cover of a Stanley Cup picture. He's my candidate. Like, that's literally what it is.
Yeah, I was in a layover in LAX and I saw him on a Sports Center package. So, anyways.
Must be good. Now, that's kind of a bummer way to end things. Is there anything good we wanna shout out before we go here or anything?
Shout out to Halford and Bruff for getting back on the 650 airwaves in the morning. It's been a godsend to morning radio for people like me who you listen to it on the commute and the starting to my mornings. I think you're the same way too. Shout out to or not shout out, but just a plug. Botchford Project applications. Got to get those in. I think it's April 6th or something. That's the cutoff. After this, I gotta go over some other people's applications and help them out. So make sure everyone is getting theirs in. You don't want to miss this opportunity. I'm pretty sure it'll come back next season for 2021, 2022, but like, you don't want to take any chances that things change.
And you can reapply. And you can reapply next year too if you don't get it. So just do it every year until you do.
Just take it from me, just a dude. But besides me, Lachlan, where can the fine folks find you if they want to catch up on your work, mister?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Lock in the Crease. And you can also find our podcast on Facebook. And we have a Facebook page now, and we have an Instagram page. If you want to go check those out for a little bit of just if you want to have another way of being informed of when we have new episodes and new content available for you guys. Cody, where can they find you?
The fine folks listening to the CreaseCast can find me at Cody Sievertson on Twitter, and my work, even though it has been on a month-long hiatus due to COVID, you can find my work at thecometsharvest.com. and Comets Harvest on Instagram, though, like I said, I have not had much to post because of COVID.
And I forgot to plug my website, lockinthecrease.com, for the actual blog posts where I do the North Division Power Rankings every single Sunday.
There you go. Don't forget to rate, like, and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel if that's where you're watching from. And don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite podcasting service. We appreciate every review, and it helps us in the algorithms to pump our numbers up and get us some more view and airtime. Until our next episode.
Check out our Patreon as well.
Oh, yeah, we have one of those. We just posted an episode where we talked about NFTs, Scooby-Doo eats, and a bunch of other random shit, and it was a good time.
And Cody did a book review, which was really good.
I did, and I'm almost finished my second book, which has nothing to do with hockey, but I might be reviewing that next time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Till then, we'll be dropping our next episode Saturday, which will be recapping possibly the Canucks' lone game against the Calgary Flames. Maybe it'll be trade news, who knows? But until then, folks, we will see you guys next time. The battle for fifth begins.
Yes.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll catch you guys later.
See ya.
Bye.